Chapter 8: Monitoring, Modification, and Maintenance. If you are not monitoring, you are not improving your craft. Dave Rosgen. Introduction. All successful stream restoration projects have a monitoring component. Monitoring should address channel morphology, hydrology, ecology, and structure performance. Because the induced meandering method relies on the power of flowing water to change a stream channel over an extended period of time, and the rate of change is dependent on frequency and intensity of flow events, monitoring is a crucial part of an induced meandering restoration project. Project monitoring is not research, it is an essential step in assaying project success. It is how restorationists track progress towards reaching their goals for the restored reach. Project monitoring is not just scientific data gathering for its own sake. It is the gathering of information needed for adaptive management made more valuable if done scientifically. Are the structures too high, too short, too wide, too long? Are they effective? Monitoring provides the guidance for adjusting treatments and making adjustments in a timely fashion if the treated reach is not responding as planned. Monitoring also informs future project design, construction, and cost estimation. It is wise to budget ahead, incorporating future monitoring and maintenance costs into project planning. Monitoring can be particularly informative if scheduled in harmony with the annual stream hydrograph at the end of the spring snowmelt period and at the end of the summer monsoon season. Scheduling monitoring by season helps to differentiate between the effects of a prolonged winter runoff event versus sudden, short summer events operating above bankful. Monitoring and maintenance done at the end of snowmelt can ready the project for the onset of the monsoon season, and at the end of monsoon rains for the oncoming winter and subsequent snowmelt. Additionally, the project area should be monitored as soon as possible following a particularly large or unusual event. Specific reasons for monitoring. Identifying needed maintenance on a timely basis so that the minor repairs can be made before major damage occurs. Evaluating structure performance in response to initial flood flows and subsequent storm events. Evaluating channel response to treatment. Having a basis for modifying, removing, adding, replacing, or relocating structures or treatments not performing as planned. Measuring project-related effects on ecologic, hydrologic, and geomorphic processes. Photo 8-1. Meeting reporting requirements of funding agencies, landowners, and cooperating agencies. Meeting Clean Water Act 404-401 permitting and reporting requirements. The essential elements of effective monitoring are standardization, following protocols, and timeliness. Monitoring must minimize variability in the way that data are gathered so that the detected change is real and not just an artifact of the data collection process. Photo 8-1. Collecting well data on Pueblo, Colorado wash at Hubbell Trading Post, Apache County, Arizona. Photo by Courtney White. Monitoring methods. Hydrologic record. Monitoring should first review the recent hydrologic record to determine the magnitude, intensity, timing, and duration of flood events occurring since the last monitoring exercise. Without flood events, nothing happens. It's the water that does the work. Too little flooding creates no response. Too much may damage structures and cause unintended consequences. A storm that could damage new structures may have little or no effect on structures that have settled in response to several lesser events. Photo monitoring. Photo monitoring documents change occurring between retakes. Please refer to Appendix I for an outline of photo monitoring procedures and photo point record sheets. The essential elements of useful photo monitoring are selecting photo point locations that offer the best vantage point for tracking anticipated change over the life of the project. Photo 8-2, 8-3. Documenting and monumenting photo point locations so that they can be precisely reestablished during repeat photographic events. Normalizing camera functions such as lens settings, viewfinding, and image resolution on film or electronic cards to minimize variability. Scheduling photo sequences so that expected change is recorded at the same hour and day of year to eliminate any apparent differences due to sun angle and shadow lengths. Lighting that best illuminates the scene. Photo 8-2. Initial take of photo point 3, May 1998. Pueblo, Colorado Wash, Hubble Trading Post, Apache County, Arizona. Photos by Bill Zeedyke. Photo 8-3. Repeat photo, photo point 3, June 2nd, 2002. The channel has widened following treatment. Photo point locations should be documented, located by GPS or triangulated by compass and mapped. Photo point locations should be documented, located by GPS or triangulated by compass and mapped. Photo points should be physically monumented with rock cairns, stakes, or posts to assure accurate replication. The top of a T-post, set at the ideal camera height, provides a station from which to re-establish the photo point precisely. Referring to the initial photo for framing the repeat photo in the viewfinder guarantees repeating the original scene. A tripod provides a stable camera platform, making it easier to compare the initial photo with the viewfinder image. Scheduling repeat photography for the same day of the year and same time of day assures the same sun angle so that important information will not be obscured by shadows or distorted by highlights. Photos 8-4, 8-5. Finally, using film or electronic imaging with the same degree of image resolution and color sensitivity assures that data will not be lost in the recording process or misinterpreted. Photo monitoring is time-consuming and expensive, but provides valuable documentation for project results. Make every effort to normalize as many variables as feasible so that observed change is real and attributable to project effects and not merely an artifact of sloppy camera work. One additional point. Detecting change between successive photo images is facilitated by including 2 or more identifiable reference points in the scene. Preferably, one will be an object in the foreground and the other in the background. Showing a bit of the horizon in the photo helps to orient the viewer and makes comparison of before and after photos quicker and easier. The viewscape should be framed to allow space for expected change to occur within the framed area. Vegetation monitoring. Vegetation monitoring enables detection of change in plant species composition, cover, density, vigor, reproduction, age class distribution, decadence, and mortality. A variety of survey methods are available that are especially adapted for use in riparian and wetland habitats. Appendix J. As with repeat photography, rigorously observing survey protocols is essential to gaining meaningful information that can be interpreted with confidence. Photo 8-6. In addition to identifying measurable change in the plant community by vegetation monitoring, important inferences can be drawn regarding the hydrology of the site, including changes in depth and extent of groundwater, barriers to groundwater movement, and depth to the capillary fringe upon which riparian plants depend. For example, replacement of upland species by wetland species might indicate a rise in the water table, as when juniper trees are replaced by young cottonwoods and willows. Change in growth rates, foliage color, decadence, or mortality might also indicate change in depth of the water table. A yellowing of ponderosa pine foliage could indicate a rising water table and developing hydric anaerobic soil conditions in a recently restored wet meadow. For the following discussion on expected vegetation changes for ephemeral, intermittent, and perennial flow regimes as channel evolution progresses, please refer to typical gully evolution from a Rosgen G to a Rosgen C channel type, figure 4-5, page 77. Vegetation change in ephemeral channels. Channel type G to F. As depositional bars develop at deflectors and the channel aggrades above weirs, expect particle size to decrease and available moisture to increase in bar deposits. Depending upon climate, elevation, geology, and bed materials, various upland and arroyo plant species may begin to occupy the bars and banks as individual plants, small groups, or narrow strands. Typical species may include western wheatgrass, alkali saccaton, four-wing saltbush, rabbit brush, or Apache plume. Upland plant species will continue to dominate banks and terraces. Channel type F to C. As the channel widens and bars expand to form narrow, discontiguous floodplain fragments, expect density, diversity, and vigor of arroyo species to increase. Patches and bands of similar species will replace scattered individual stems and strands. Plant density at the base of stream banks will begin to exceed that of upland species on terraces and high banks. Vegetation change in intermittent channels. Channel type G to F. Expect wetland obligate and facultative species to invade and dominate perennial pools and perennially wetted soils. Ephemeral reaches may be dominated by upland and arroyo species, such as Apache plume. Subterranean stream reaches will be dominated by riparian species. Patches of various willow species may colonize sites during wet cycles, only to die back during drought cycles. Gullies through former wetland locations will be occupied by single stems, small patches, and strands of wetland and facultative species such as rushes, sedges, and cattail. In more arid climates, deergrass and giant saccaton may slowly colonize the site. Channel F to C. Expect rapid expansion of strands and patches of riparian and wetland species and increasing vigor among riparian plants growing on first terraces as soil moisture increases. Vegetation densities on terraces and banks should now exceed densities on adjacent uplands. Vegetation change in perennial channels. Channel type G to F. These include perennial channels and gullies through former wetlands. Expect evolving point bars and lateral bars to be colonized by rapidly expanding strands of wetland obligate species such as spike rush, Baltic rush, aquatic sedges, cattails, bulrushes, and three square as well as willows, alders, cottonwoods, and other woody species. Expect decadence and mortality among upland species. Relict stems or patches of riparian plants on terraces may display increased vigor in response to a rising water table. Channel F to C. As point bars and floodplains expand, expect patches and strands of wetland and riparian species to expand rapidly with high density and vigorous growth. Upland species will decline and disappear as floodplain soils expand and become more hydric. Ecological monitoring. Surveys to detect and measure change in ecological conditions favoring different classes or species of animals include surveys of aquatic macroinvertebrates, birds, small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes. Some species or species groups are more sensitive to subtle changes in environmental conditions than others. For example, colonization by non-mobile aquatic insects such as caddisflies, which are easily identifiable, could indicate that a formerly ephemeral pool had evolved to perennial. Likewise, replacement of certain toad species by frogs might indicate change from ephemeral to perennial conditions. The choice of survey methods to measure or detect change in riparian ecology varies widely between the class and species of animals being surveyed. Different surveying methods would be required to detect significant change in breeding bird populations versus wintering populations, and might take several years of data collection to validate. Expert advice should be sought. What about beavers? The question has been raised. How do beavers and their dams affect an induced meandering project, and how should they be dealt with? An induced meandering project can quickly result in the rapid growth and expansion of willows, cottonwoods, and emergent aquatic vegetation such as cattails and bulrushes, all food for beavers. If there are beavers in the vicinity or just passing through, they may soon occupy the project area. Photo 8-7. Their vision of a restored stream reach may differ somewhat from that of the project planner, and their dam and canal building activities may soon compromise induced meandering structures, not to mention the overall project design. Weirs, baffles, vanes, and cross vanes make handy platforms for dam building. Beaver dams that raise the water surface elevation can alter the direction and velocity of flow while easily negating the effectiveness of structures not incorporated into the dams. Effects on overall project goals can vary widely from beneficial to neutral to harmful, depending on the location situation. The presence of the beavers should be viewed holistically in terms of total project effects, since it will be futile to try to remove the beavers' building materials from the individual structure and keep it clean on a continuing basis. The beavers will quickly and persistently replace any missing sticks and mud, frustrating all attempts to repair the structure. Since the goal of induced meandering projects is to further the evolution of incised channels to the non-incised condition, the presence of beavers in an incised system is generally beneficial. Beavers help to widen the flood-prone area, increase the entrenchment ratio, reconnect the channel with its floodplain, expand the riparian zone, abate floods, increase alluvial water storage, augment base flows, and create habitat for a wide variety of other plant and animal species. These affects must be weighed against project objectives. Are the effects beneficial or detrimental overall? Generally, the steeper the channel slope, the more problematic the advent of beaver dams can be, and the more devastating the prospect of failure. Demise of the population colony due to predation, famine, or human intervention, eradication, can lead to sudden failure of the dams with serious consequences for channel stability. The most common impacts are channel avulsions, rapidly advancing headcuts, and excess sedimentation of downstream reaches. While the benefits derived from a healthy beaver colony can be many, they do not come without a cost. Costs can include loss of desirable trees and shrubs, damage to irrigation systems, flooded farmlands, the plugging of road culverts, tunneling through dams and dikes, and the blockage of spillways and drainage facilities. Beavers must fit with the purpose of ownership of the landowners and their neighbors. Communities can be torn in bitter controversy between neighbors who love having beavers for environmental reasons and those who hate them for the economic risks posed by their presence. Unfortunately, short of outright removal, there is little that can be done to protect in-stream structures, baffles, weirs. Unfortunately, short of outright removal, there is little that can be done to protect in-stream structures, baffles, weirs, and crossveins from beaver activity, even though the beavers may be doing much to improve the health of the stream ecosystem. On the other hand, various techniques are available to protect capital improvements from the dam building activities, making it feasible for the owners to accept the presence of beavers. These include beaver excluders and beaver deceivers, devices designed, built, and installed by practitioners such as Skip Lysel. Beaver Deceivers International. Fruit trees and other valuable trees and shrubs can be wrapped or fenced with net wire or field wire to protect them from beavers and other herbivores. Experience of the authors has been highly variable in regard to the effect of beavers on individual induced meandering projects. At the dry Cimarron River, beavers were welcomed by the landowner as a significant force for channel restoration, even though some structures were compromised. Photo 8-8, page 169. At Nutrioso Creek, the authors persuaded the landowner to accept beavers for their geomorphological, environmental, and ecological benefits once some unique trees and rare willows were protected by beaver-proof fencing. While a few structures were compromised by beaver activities, the great majority continued to function over a 3-mile stream reach. In another example, A transplanted population of beavers has had neutral effects on an induced meandering project in a very deeply incised reach of Cebolla Canyon in the El Mapai Natural Conservation Area. Finally, a self-introduced population of beavers on Comanche Creek was seen by some as a threat to riparian restoration efforts intended to benefit the Rio Grande cutthroat trout on Carson National Forest, and the beavers were relocated. In short, the pros and cons of beavers are many and complex. In a wildland setting, the benefit of having beavers present will usually outweigh the risk of the project. In farmland settings, the situation may be reversed. The wishes of the landowner, acting from a holistic perspective, should always be considered. Geomorphological monitoring. Geomorphological monitoring is used to detect and measure change in the dimension, plan, and profile of the project reach. Monitoring begins with a pre-treatment survey, followed by a survey of the as-built condition, and finally by post-treatment monitoring. Parameters to monitor include channel width, depth, length, slope, flood-prone width, and particle size from which dimensionless ratios are compiled and interpreted. Standard methods for performing needed surveys are briefly described in Chapter 3. Protocols to assure that successive surveys produce comparable results include carefully monumenting bank markers and survey points, especially starting and stopping points for cross-sections and longitudinal profiles. Monuments and references should be carefully described for ease of relocating and located where they will not be damaged or lost as the alignment of the stream reach changes in response to treatment, flooding, or other reasons, such as land clearing, road building, and carefully described for ease of relocating. In the photos below, erosion of the stream bank lower left made it possible to replicate the photo point exactly. Potential channel response to treatment should be anticipated when selecting photo point location. Standard cross-sectional surveys are placed at riffle sections to classify channel types as described in Chapter 3. A set of radial surveys originating from a central hub is a useful adaptation for measuring the rate and extent of bank erosion and point bar deposition at a meander apex resulting from the installation of a baffle or a vane. The radial survey is also useful for tracking plant succession on the evolving meander apex with accumulating sediments and a changing water table. Photo 8-11, Figure 8-1. Data gathered at cross-sections will be useful in determining if the location, design, or dimension of the deflectors are correct or might need modification. Data from longitudinal profiles can be used to determine if the invert elevations or position of weirs may need adjusting. For example, excess sedimentation of a pool might indicate that the invert elevation of the next downstream weir was too high. Excess scour might indicate the need for placement of additional footer rocks or that the original footer had been too shallow. Good survey procedures require that field notes and electronic data be reviewed and edited while still on site so that timely corrections can be made before the opportunity to check the data is lost. Since the primary purpose of geomorphological monitoring is to track progress towards reaching management goals for the project reach, its value lies in properly interpreting trends across the length of the reach, not just at individual structures. Expected changes resulting from induced meandering are displayed in Figure 8-2, page 172. Expected geomorphological trends resulting from induced meandering application. Results should be interpreted in terms of the reach as a whole and will be evident initially as changes to subreaches. Some individual meanders within the reach may respond more quickly than others due to a variety of reasons, including bank cohesiveness, bank height, riparian vegetation, structure performance, and other factors. Channel width will increase more rapidly at the meander apex than at the crossover where the riffle is located. Therefore, change in width of the flood-prone area as measured at standard cross-sections will not be apparent initially, even though the width is increasing at the meander bend. It is important that data be interpreted objectively in terms of minimum requirements for each Roskin channel type as classified in Figure 3-1, page 44. Hydrologic monitoring. Induced meandering cannot change the hydrology of the watershed, but it can change the hydrology of the treated reach and perhaps that of adjacent downstream reaches. Induced meandering does not make water, but it can increase the temporal and spatial distribution of available water within the treated reach and, to some extent, adjacent reaches and landforms. Induced meandering can cause a modest rise in the water table, increase bank storage, expand the capillary fringe that sustains riparian vegetation, extend the duration of base flow, and lengthen the period of soil saturation. The changing hydrology of the treated reach can be observed visually or measured objectively with instrumentation. Fluctuations in the height of the water table can be noted by observing the depth and duration of exposed water in new scour pools, bend pools, oxbows, and dug pits next to the stream. Seepage from the downstream edge of the convex bank of a meander bend is another indicator. Figure 2-4, Chapter 2, page 21. If seepage is yellowish-orange in color, it may be due to leaching of ferric iron from formerly hydric soils, another indication of a rising water table. The capillary fringe will be apparent as the upper boundary of exposed moist soil. Fluctuations in the height of the capillary fringe may be indicated by alkali deposits left behind by evaporating capillary moisture. The highest levels of alkali is a surrogate for the top of the capillary fringe. This phenomenon will be most apparent where G or F channels cut through former wetland soils. But the most reliable indicator of long-term change in the depth of the water table and its capillary fringe is to note changes in plant species composition along the stream bank. Decadence and mortality of rabbitbrush or chamisa, sage, shrubby cinquefoil, and junipers accompanied by an increasing component of wetland or riparian plants such as Baltic rush, horsetail, and spike rush would be an indicator of a seasonal rise in the water table within the rooting depth of those plants. If more precise measurements of water table fluctuations are desired, the use of water wells and piezometers is recommended. A piezometer is a small diameter observation well used to measure elevation of groundwater in aquifers. Photos 8-12, 8-13. Similarly, it may also be a standpipe, tube, vibrating wire piezometer, or manometer used to measure the pressure of a fluid at a specific location in a column. Other methods can be used to record the height of the capillary zone. Soil temperature loggers can be used to determine the extent of wetted areas. Installation of piezometers into the water table in the active channel of the stream or into the flood plain can establish whether it is influent, feeding the groundwater, or effluent, being fed by groundwater. Water levels in the wells can be measured and related to the water level in the stream to determine the direction of water movement. Figure 8-3. Visual inspection of structures. Visual inspection involves walking the treated reach in a deliberate way and systematically inspecting all structures, practices, and treatments to determine effects, noting obvious repair needs, and interpreting apparent responses to treatment. It is imperative that structures be inspected and changes monitored right after the first significant flow event following installation. The inspection should be done with the plans in hand while the observer looks for damage to structures and evidence of initial channel response. The inspection provides essential information from which to fine-tune treatments and repair structures before major damage occurs during subsequent flood events. Are structures damaged? Have boulders or rocks moved? Photos 8-14, 8-15, 8-16. Has a structure become clogged with debris or compromised by a nearby debris jam? Photos 8-17, 8-18. If so, has this helped or hindered? Has a scour hole or bypass channel developed that would jeopardize a structure? How has the channel responded to each structure or vegetation treatment? As the inspection progresses, obvious structural deficiencies and apparent effects will be noted. These findings are then used to schedule maintenance activities and are filed for future reference in tracking long-term channel response. As the inspection progresses, obvious structural deficiencies and apparent effects will be noted. These findings are then used to schedule maintenance activities and are filed for future reference in tracking long-term channel response. In summary, meaningful visual inspection requires timeliness, a systematic review, an inquisitive mind, and careful note-taking, evaluating structure condition and performance, prescribing modifications and maintenance. An objective evaluation of all structures, their apparent condition and performance should be conducted soon after the first flood event. An objective evaluation of all structures, their apparent condition and performance should be conducted soon after the first flood event and subsequently with each successive flood until stability is achieved and project goals are satisfied. A thoughtful inspection of structures and a deliberate appraisal of channel response to treatment will enable appropriate modification and maintenance of structures in keeping with project goals and objectives. The following pages describe conditions and situations commonly encountered and contain suggestions for modifying, maintaining, or repairing damaged or non-performing structures. The lists of success indicators, problem indicators, probable causes, and suggested repairs are based on the experience of the authors and are certainly not exhaustive. The lists of success indicators, problem indicators, probable causes, and suggested repairs are based on the experience of the authors and are certainly not exhaustive. Whenever attempting to diagnose structural failure, the reader is urged to carefully consider dominant channel-forming processes at the site. Before diagnosing problems related to insufficient response, make sure that the stream has flooded to bankful stage for enough time to give the structures a chance to function. Before diagnosing problems related to insufficient response, make sure that the stream has flooded to bankful stage for enough time to give the structures a chance to function. Baffles. Success indicators. Component materials. Rocks, pickets, wicker are intact and in place as built. Sediment is being deposited as point bars or lateral bars upstream and downstream of the structure along the adjacent bank. Fine textured sediment particles are being deposited at or near bankful elevation, creating a favorable seed bed for colonizing vegetation. Fine textured sediment particles are being deposited at or near bankful elevation, creating a favorable seed bed for colonizing vegetation. Appropriate species of plants are colonizing the point bar and structure surface. The opposite bank is eroding and receding. A bend pool is evolving opposite the structure. The meander radius is increasing. Channel length and sinuosity are increasing. Problem indicators. A. Components missing or displaced, especially at the tip of the structure. Probable cause. If a rock baffle, rocks are too small, not embedded or not adequately supported by deep footer rocks. If a picket baffle, pickets are not driven below scour depth. Repairs. Replace missing rocks with larger pieces. Embed rocks in a trench or support with deeper footer rocks. Replace missing pickets with longer pieces driven more deeply. If pickets cannot be installed deeply, support with rocks or consider replacing the baffle with a vane. B. Structure altered by accumulating debris, especially large woody debris. Probable cause. Debris originating from collapsing banks or upstream sources. Photos 8-17, 8-18. Repairs. Remove any accumulated debris that interferes with structure performance, being careful not to remove debris that supports or enhances it. Debris that creates eddying or turbulence that threatens the structure itself should be removed. Other effects may be more difficult to judge. C. Point bar not developing at baffle. Probable causes. Structure too small, too low, or too flat to concentrate and deflect stream flow toward opposite bank, or opposite bank very cohesive or armored. Repairs. Enlarge the structure by increasing its width, raising the surface elevation, or by removing armoring materials, rocks, or vegetation from opposite bank. If the baffle is located at the base of the outboard concave bank, point bars will not form. This was the wrong placement for a baffle. Remove it or replace with a vane. D. Opposite bank not eroding. Bank not receding, meander radius not increasing. Probable causes. Same as above. Repairs. Extend baffle toward opposite bank. Increase dimensions and or raise surface. remove armoring materials, rock or vegetation, from opposite bank to expose bank to erosion. E. Fine textured sediments not being deposited on surface of baffle or not in acceptable amounts. Probable causes. If the surface of the structure is rough, uneven, or not streamlined due to irregular sized rocks, eddying and turbulence can result, presenting sediment deposition. Repairs. Remove oversized rocks, pickets, or debris that might be causing turbulence. Replace with rocks or pickets that do not protrude above average plane of the baffle surface. F. A cutoff chute has developed between baffle and adjacent bank. Probable causes. The soil is highly erodible, not protected by vegetation, or baffle is too large, forcing some flow to pass behind the structure. Repairs. This situation may or may not be harmful because the cutoff is actually increasing channel width. However, stream power that is needed to erode the opposite bank is being lost through the cutoff. Recommended treatment is to block cutoff at bank full elevation with rocks or pickets. G. Channel pattern is not changing as planned. Channel length and sinuosity are not increasing. Probable causes. Most likely, the baffles are not competent to force erosion of the opposite banks because of cohesiveness or bank armoring. If possible, increase size of aggressiveness of baffles, scarify opposite banks to increase erosion rates, or consider replacing baffles with veins. Repairs. Match the baffle to the channel type. In a G channel, the width of the baffle should not exceed 40% of the channel width because excessive force will damage the tip of the baffle. In an F channel, the width of the baffle can equal 50 to 70% of channel width in order to concentrate sufficient force against the opposite bank without subjecting the baffle itself to excessive force. Veins. Success indicators. Component materials are intact and functioning as designed. A point bar is developing in the apex of the vein. Vegetation is colonizing the evolving point bar and adjacent bank. The opposite bank is eroding and receding. A bend pool is evolving opposite the vein. A meander pattern is evolving as planned. Meander radius is increasing. Channel length and sinuosity are increasing. Problem indicators. A. Boulders or posts are missing or displaced. A scour hole is undercutting the structure. If a boulder vein, the structure may lack footer rocks or footers were not properly installed. Alternatively, the vein might be too tall, extend above bank full elevation of channel, or too steep, angle of descent from bank to tip. If a post vein, posts were probably not installed deeply below scour depth. Repairs. If a boulder vein, rebuild structure with properly installed footer rocks, height and length. If a post vein, replace missing posts with longer pieces driven to well below scour depth. Point bar not developing in apex of vein. Probable causes. Vein not long enough, too tall, too short, or angle of the apex is too wide, greater than 20 degrees. If a post vein, posts may be too widely spaced. Repairs. Reconstruct vane with proper dimensions or drive additional posts to fill the spaces. C. Opposite bank not eroding and receding. Bend pool not forming opposite vane. Probable causes, same as above. Repairs, same as above. D. Channel is incised between vanes. Channel length not increasing. Probable cause. Stream banks are cohesive or armored. Therefore, concentrated flow from the vanes is directed at the stream bed instead of at the banks. Repairs. Remove every other vane to reduce bed scour and install grade control structures. Rock weirs and one-rock dams. Success indicators. Components are intact as built. Water is pooled upstream of structure or detained in accumulated sediment. The water table is rising in the adjacent stream banks. Sediment is accumulating between rocks, and channel is migrating upstream of the structure. Vegetation has colonized the surface of the structure and the aggraded channel. Vegetation exhibits high vigor and increasing density. Problem indicators. A. Rocks or boulders missing from structure, scour hole, or scour apron is undercutting structure. Probable causes. One rock dam was installed on fine textured bed materials without footer rocks at downstream edge. Height of dam may be too high. Example, greater than 1/3 mean depth, causing excessive scour. Repairs. Use the scour apron created by the last flood as a trench to install footer rocks along the downstream edge of the structure. B. Little or no sediment is accumulating between rocks or on surface of structure. Bed may or may not be a grading. Probable causes. Sparse sediment supply or sediment composed of very fine textured particles that pass easily through interstices between the rocks comprising the dam. This is likely in streams arising from karst topography. Repairs. Chink the structure with small diameter gravel to decrease width of interstices between the rocks in order to capture finer sediment particles. C. Flood flows are bypassing structure and creating a cutoff chute along one or both banks. Probable causes. Dam has a flat surface and does not flare upward along the bank or curves like a crossvein, or bank not protected by streamside vegetation. Repairs. The cutoff chute is not necessarily undesirable and has the effect of widening the channel. However, it may eventually destroy the structure. Repair the chute by plugging it with rocks or pickets to the height of the structure. D. Flows are directed toward next downstream deflector, baffle or vane, and may be damaging it. Probable causes. One rock dam or weir was installed without sufficient skew. Repairs. Rebuild or modify structure to create sufficient skew, usually about 15 degrees from the axis of the channel. Lack of sufficient skew is a common deficiency where one-rock dams or weirs are installed in channels with low sinuosity. Wicker weirs. Success indicators. All success indicators applicable to one-rock dams apply to wicker weirs. Problem indicators. A. Wicker materials have been lost or displaced or have decayed. Probable causes. Inappropriate woody materials were used for wicker. Wicker materials may have been too short or too limby for weaving or not pliable, therefore a tight weave was not achieved. Drylands flood frequency too low, allowing structure to decompose before floods occur. Repairs. Replace missing pickets and reweave wicker portion with more suitable material, such as long, pliable willow stems or small diameter juniper whips, 1/2 to 1 inch in diameter and 8 to 10 feet in length. Alternate stem orientation for a tighter, more compact fit. Keep maintaining until structure fills with sediment. B. A scour apron has evolved along the downstream weir edge. Pickets have been lost or displaced. Wicker abraded. Probable causes. Weir height greater than 1/3 mean depth of channel. Individual rows of wicker within a weir do not step down. Pickets not driven well below scour depth. Wicker abraded by the bedload. If the rows of the wicker weir do not descend, lower the downstream rows to create a ramp effect. If the bed is cobble or large gravel, remove wicker structure and replace with rocks. Wicker is not suitable for use in steep gravel or cobble-bedded channels. Wicker weirs are best used in perennial channels flowing over fine textured bed materials. A wicker weir functions as a surrogate for a natural hammock of tree roots and sod. Cross veins. Success indicators. Boulders are intact and in place. The scour pool below structure is maintained by concentrated velocity. Stream banks are well vegetated. Problem indicators. A. Component material missing or displaced. Probable causes. Boulders are not properly installed, undersized. Boulders are not properly installed, undersized, or irregular in shape and not firmly placed in structure. Repairs. If no evidence of undercutting, replace the missing rocks with a rock or rocks of proper size and shape to secure a tight fit. Backfill disturbed area with tightly packed cobble or gravel-sized material to plug any leaks that might threaten the structure later. B. Scour developing downstream of the invert rock or a vein arm. Interpretation. This is normal and part of the design. Check that footer rocks are secure. C. Scour developing on banks or downstream of vein arms. Probable causes. The vein arms may be too tall or not keyed into the bank properly. Repairs. This can be a difficult problem to fix. It may be possible, if suitable machinery is available, to fill the scour apron with large rocks that will serve as footer rocks. It may also be possible to rebuild the vein to achieve the proper height and angle of descent so that the vein arms are not higher than bankfill stage at the intersection with the bank. D. A cutoff chute is developing along either or both vein arms. Probable causes. Cutoff sills were not installed when structure was built, or if so, boulders were not tightly set in the bank at the proper elevation, surface of sill equal to bankfill elevation. Repairs. Install a new sill using boulders that are properly sized and set. Sills may be reinforced by planting vegetation such as willow clumps or sedge wads with the sill at the time repairs are made. E. Sediment is accumulating upstream of the crossvein and deflecting stream flow across a vein arm instead of the invert. Probable causes: invert elevation too high and/or vein arms too flat, angle of vein arm descent from stream bank to invert too little, or vein arm intersects bank at elevation less than bankful elevation. Repairs: not easily repaired without rebuilding the structure. Reset keystone at lower elevation. Zuni bowls. Success indicators: component materials are intact. Head cutting has been halted. Lip of structure has been revegetated with tree roots. Stream banks are stable and revegetating as indicated by increased plant vigor and stocking density. No downstream bed scour or scour is not threatening the structure. Problem indicators: A. Component materials are missing or displaced, especially the top tier of rocks at the lip of the falls or pour-over. Probable causes: rocks are not properly stacked. Repairs: remove remaining rocks and restack, being sure to establish a firm base and to lay back each additional layer in order to establish a sloping rather than vertical wall. Arc and use a keystone in each row. Rocks should be carefully chinked to capture fine sediment and prevent undercutting. B. Head cut continues to progress upstream, or water is spilling between head wall and the top tier of rocks. Probable causes: rocks were not installed properly. The top of the rocks are not even with the top of the head cut, or rocks were stacked vertically and not leaned into the head wall and banks. Repairs: remove and rebuild, or excavate the top tiers of rock and construct an additional bowl. C. Rocks missing or collapsing along one or both stream banks. Probable causes: same as A above, or a change in channel alignment upstream of the structure is deflecting stream flow toward the collapsing bank. Repairs: as above, or install a short baffle or vein upstream of the structure in order to redirect flows across the center of the structure. D. Stream flow creating cutoff chute that is bypassing structure. Probable causes: structure was built slightly too high or did not focus flows into bowl. Repairs: rebuild and try again. E. A scour pool is undercutting downstream edge of structure. Probable causes: no footer rocks beneath the lower edge of the structure. Final drop to channel bed too high. Repairs: place larger footer rocks in the developing scour apron or build a one-rock dam downstream from the Zuni bowl, or, if one is present, raise the elevation in order to deepen the pool and dissipate energy. If this is done, a second one-rock dam or Zuni bowl will be needed just downstream. Summary: monitoring, modification, and maintenance are essential elements of a successful induced meandering project. Channel response to treatment rarely occurs exactly as planned due to the complexity of the many variables involved and the inability to predict the magnitude, timing, or duration of channel-shaping flood events. Monitoring, if done systematically and methodically, can provide reliable information as a basis for modifying and maintaining structures, assessing channel response to treatment, and keeping a record of progress for future reference. Objective monitoring provides information for preparing required reports to landowners and to funding and regulatory agencies. Perhaps most importantly, monitoring enables practitioners to improve their craft, refine their techniques, and verify a record of success.